spectacular. Well, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, before we actually get into, your history and your work and all of that, I want to know first and foremost. I know we're getting fatigued by COVID, but it was such a big thing for all of us. It really, for musicians, it wiped everything out. It threw just so many things into uncertainties. How did you make it through that time period, and how did it change the way that you do things now?
Yeah, it's funny. My 3-year-old just today heard me talking about the pandemic, and he said, "What's the pandemic?" And
Oh
I was
my
like,
God.
"Oh,
Wouldn't that be a great dose of ignorance?
that." Yeah. Well, but that's how my pandemic started. Actually, the first week of lockdown, I found out I was pregnant.
Yeah.
And it was something that my wife and I had been trying to make happen for a while. So we were pretty psyched for that and, grateful for the opportunity. And considering the amount of fatigue that I had with my pregnancy, it felt almost like good timing in a way, like, all right, the world's shut down, slowed down. I'm gonna rest as much as possible, which was difficult though, because I like to do things and be active.
Yeah.
Um, but the flip side of that was, I started my parenthood journey, I would say, sort of hyper vigilant and, overprotective. And I was pretty strict in terms of, wanting to stay isolated, especially during this pregnancy and infancy. And that was challenging, from a musical perspective. And it really shed light on the fact of, I'd love to play music with people and I love to play music for people. That's something that I have a lot more presence and gratitude for, after going through that whole experience. I I recorded, I did, what a lot of musicians did, and recorded some, live from home kind of videos for various people who were putting things on, and did a lot of improvising. And but musically speaking, I thought I would compose more during that time, and I really didn't. I was mostly focused on teaching online and creating a human.
Yeah. The one thing that's interesting, just a quick side note before we get in to the latest album. I'd always thought that everybody that was kind of incubating a child during this time period, I have one son, his name's Miles for obvious reasons. And there was always this thing about voices and music that the child could hear from the womb that would increase their
Mm,
intelligence. Okay. So all of that would be a benefit to the child. I thought, what if there was something that was like Stranger Things for all of these kids, and they're called the COVID kids, and
yeah.
they come up with an antidote one day to end the whole COVID strain. And it's because they were born during this, they have this super sensitive ability of finding like a scientific breakthrough. So I'm hoping for it.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely feel like my son has um a sensitivity to the sound of the trombone. Like we'll listen to anything, and then at the minute he hears, the trombone come in, he'll be like trombone, like and he gets psyched about it. And he really loves, he can sit through any concert, like, better than some adults, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, he can sit front row in a quiet listening room concert, and he just loves observing everybody. And so it's been really lovely to share that with him.
So I just interviewed John Fedchock a few weeks ago. He's going to come to Kansas City, and he did a commemoration of the 100-year birthday of J.J. Johnson.
Yeah.
And I every time I see the trombone or I really think about it, um, it's the one brass instrument where there's zero rules. It's like the rebellion instrument, because you could stop it at certain parsecs and it would always be somewhat different. But when you're doing a sax or you're doing a trumpet, it's like there's like a hard stop. There's
Right.
there's something that's different. Um, so my question to you is someone that's kind of a novice to the instrument, what's one of the more fascinating things about playing the trombone that people probably don't realize?
Fascinating things. Um, I mean, to go off of your point, I think the timbral possibilities are that on the instrument is what keeps me fascinated, really. I just feel like there are endless possibilities of textures and sounds and things that you can create. And because it's in the tenor range, I feel like it resonates more deeply as, a human voice would.
Yeah.
Um, and the slide is so fun, and that's one of the reasons why I picked up the instrument as a fifth grader. I just loved this idea. I had played piano prior to that, and just like you said, is very exact and specific. If you want to play a note, you press here. And I was fascinated by this instrument where I could just be more fluid and more physical and produce sounds in that way. And yeah, the quarter tone possibilities and all of that kind of in between stuff is really fun on the instrument.
So, Shatter the Glass Sanctuary is kind of an homage of sorts of you coming from the bustling metropolis of Seattle to a smaller existence in Montana. So, talk to me a little bit about how you arrived at the title and kind of what this journey was like that you've actually put into music.
Yeah, I'll start with the title. That came from the very last track on the album, which is now called Shatter It, because I ended up calling the whole suite of music Shatter the Glass Sanctuary. But originally, when I wrote that song, that was a phrase that came to me after I'm very privileged to live by this beautiful creek and forest, and spend a lot of time walking in there. And that melody came to me, and then I came home to my piano and started fleshing out the chords and the harmony for it. And I was just belting that melody out over and over again as I found the chords that I wanted to support it. And it felt like a catharsis, and it felt like there were all these things that I was sort of holding on a pedestal. Even the fact of moving to this small town that I wasn't really enjoying at the time, and I was really struggling with, some isolation, um, and it felt like, let me just knock all these things down. Let me open the door for myself to feel these, challenging feelings that I was trying to put at bay, and actually make space, for the hard stuff. And so it was that kind of expression. That's where the title came from.
So, was it a lot of culture shock to go from a place like Seattle to Missoula, Montana?
Yeah, I suppose so. I've never put it in those terms, but I moved here in 2016, which was an election year,
Oh,
and a challenging one. And that, after that election, I was kind of like, where am I? Like, I'm a queer woman here in Montana. Like, how is this going to go? I play black music, and but actually, Missoula is, it's quite a bubble, for better or for worse. It feels like a very liberal, progressive town. And as I was listening to people at the coffee shops and stuff, I was like, okay, I think we're cool here. Um, and I have family here. My brother has lived here for many years, which was part of the inspiration. So it's in that sense, I kind of knew, I had been visiting and I knew about the culture, but in the sense of just having more going on, music you could go see every night, multiple, awesome concerts that you can see every night. Sometimes that happens here, but not all the time. Um, and so that's the isolation piece, and sort of my challenge. Because I actually really love being here. I love the slower pace, and I love the connection to nature. And I want to be around music as much as possible. And that's always been sort of a tension in my life. I grew up in Chicago, but I used to spend summers in the mountains of North Carolina. And I used to think, okay, you have a city and then you have mountains, and
yeah.
they're that far apart. Then I moved to the West Coast, and I was like, oh, actually, you can put cities and mountains, pretty much right on top of each other. And that's, I fallen in love with this part of the country. And after living in cities for a while, I decided to flip the script and say, okay, let me come to Montana, spend more of my time here, and then travel to the city instead of being in the city and traveling more for nature. And I still, it's an experiment for me. And everything kind of got blown out of the water in 2020. In 2019, I felt really like I had a good balance. I was touring, every 4 to 6 weeks, and that felt good. And then I had, my teaching studio here and some projects going on here, and now I'm recreating that balance again as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird to realize just you saying 2016 how long this nightmare has been going on politically and
Yeah.
how good it's going to be hopefully that it just stops just because it would just be so good. But it is interesting because in Kansas City, there's rural places. And I think the thing about humans that I've realized, especially in interviewing, is that we're so much more alike. The political machine makes it as though we're so divided, but there's a lot of what we're going for that is so similar, even though we all are different. And I think
Hmm.
we're all going towards the same kinds of things, especially when you have a family of giving and providing and fulfilling yourself with the career and the artistic vision that you have, and I
Yeah.
think you find that when you get to a smaller portion of the world that it's not as harrowing as the media might make it look.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do think it's important to have dialogue and conversation with people who, across the board. And it's so easy to be siloed. And But it's also scary to have those conversations too. And
In this day and age, it is, yeah, for sure,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
So, what are you ultimately hoping the listener gets from this album?
Um, I think about instrumental music as, um, I mean, really as a sanctuary. That's what it has been for me. I grew up with three brothers, and playing music was my sanctuary in my household, to have a space for emotional connection that sometimes you can't put into words, but there's these feelings you have. And even just playing a Bach invention, I feel like I can access this emotional landscape that I can't necessarily put into words or have room to express with my, family. And so that's what I do now as a composer and as a performer. Is I feel like I provide these landscapes for folks to have their own emotional connection and journey, and make up whatever story you want. I have a story about all the music and the songs, but I don't need you to know that story. I'm happy to share, but I feel like what I want listeners to experience is their own emotional experience. While enjoying, there's some humor in the album, and there's some just, fun connections amongst the musicians. It's a six-piece band, and I really did my best to make sure that we had every combination of instruments playing within those six pieces at any given moment in the recording. And I just this is my first recording that I did in the studio in just 2 days. Like, hey, let's just bust this out. And so it feels like a really cool archive of that, particular moment, and just the energy that we had in the studio that weekend.
So take me back to where you're born and raised, and how did you initially get to a point where you decided music is the way, and then more specifically, jazz is my focal point?
Yeah. So I was born in Western Massachusetts. My family traveled a bit when I was a kid. And so we lived there for a couple of years, and then we lived in Western North Carolina for a couple of years. And then we moved to the west side of Chicago, which is, kind of that's where I started my musical journey. Music was always big in my household. My parents had a great record collection, and we were always, listening to tapes in the car and radio. And we had a baby grand piano growing up, which was super fun. And my dad played a lot. And so I started on piano probably in like second grade. Um, and I have two older brothers. They started playing saxophone and trumpet around that time, and I was really intrigued by this wind instrument phenomenon. And so when it came to be my turn to, have that opportunity in elementary school, I chose the trombone. Like I mentioned, I loved the slide, I loved the range. I just resonated with the sound. I hadn't really heard any trombone music that drew me. I just was like, this is cool. I want to try this. Um, the elementary school at that time went to sixth grade, and in sixth grade we had a jazz band, and it was the first time the school had a jazz band. And we played Louie Louie, which is a great, bass line that trombones got to play. And I remember playing that for an all school assembly. And in my mind, in my memory, everyone just went wild. Like I felt like a rock star. Like I was like, oh, this is amazing. I get to play music and be in this ensemble while sharing it with this, larger group of people. I really was immediately drawn to this juxtaposition of, okay, let's play in an ensemble, let's blend, let's create something collectively while having space for that individual expression via improvisation. And that's kind of what sold me on the jazz path from an early age. And I've always been drawn to Black music. Gladys Knight was an early influence, Jackson 5, R&B and soul. I used to listen to the gospel radio station in Chicago a lot growing up, and there's so much in that music, and
Yeah,
I think it's so central to really the formation of this country.
absolutely. So take me back to the very first jazz show you saw, whether it was trombone oriented or not, and what really hooked you that made you think, man, I'm going to be up there one day.
Yeah. Gosh, that's a great question. I don't remember the first jazz show that I saw, but I certainly, benefited from Chicago. I remember going to the jazz festivals at Grant Park and the Jazz Showcase and the Hot House, and Fitzgerald's was or I think it's still a club kind of outside of the city. But honestly, it might have just been seeing my older brothers in the high school jazz band and seeing those big bands. And, a lot of those players that I grew up with outside Chicago in this suburb called Oak Park, a lot of folks are still playing music. Like there was just a really vibrant education scene there. And even those, people in that sixth grade jazz band I told you about, like there's a handful of us that are still involved in music today. And so that might have been what hooked me. My brother was a bari sax player, and him and this tenor sax player Phil Doyle, who I think is still playing today, they just always looked like they were having the best time on stage and just really into the music, which is rare for horn players when they're not playing. This is something that I tell my students, like, you're still part of the band when you're not playing. Like, I'm not going to tell you to smile, but like have your energy around the band. And they really had that. And that was really impactful for me.
So you've been at it for a little while. There's a myriad of things that you do in the realm of jazz and music. But at the end of the day, what gets you up
Mhm.
in the morning? What motivates you? What do you love the best about being a professional musician?
Okay. I mean, improvisation, um, exploring sounds, textures, colors. But I love composing too, and I love perform. I mean, it's like it's all connected to me. But to be in the practice of making music is what gets me up in the morning, and that could look like me composing one day. It could look like me improvising by myself or with friends, or or performing. I'm excited. I'm getting out on the road a little bit more this fall, and I'm excited to be playing more. And yeah.
So why do you love this art form we call jazz?
I love it for various reasons. Again, that thing that I said about the juxtaposition, or the combination, maybe is a better word, of this ensemble, collective community creation with individual expression. That to me is sort of at the heart of what I think is so valuable about this music. But there's more. I mean, I to me, I think of jazz as almost like a mindset, a mentality. I feel very open and loose with the word. You know, the word is fraught in ways that various people have pointed out throughout the years. But you know, if I think about someone like John Coltrane and Alice Coltrane, to me, jazz is that mentality of like I'm opening up. I'm going to be influenced by whatever music around the globe I can listen to and experience. There is this sort of spiritual, meditative element to jazz for me, and it's a way that I like connecting with the world and with people, and expressing myself in that way. And you know, like I said before, it's at the heart of this country, and it's like it gets to the heart and the soul of this weird experiment called the United States that we're still, you know, grappling with many of the same issues that, you know, started off when this country became a thing. And it feels so central to that as well. So
Very well said. So let me ask you this. We get off the call here, time machine pulls up in front of your house. You can go anywhere in the history of jazz and see one concert, one performer or band. Where are you going? Or a couple. You can add a few.
well, okay, so the first people that are coming to mind, I was like, the first person that came to mind was Mary Lou Williams, and then I was thinking, well, she spent time in Kansas City.
Yeah.
But I might have wanted to hit her later, like
Yeah.
when she was in New York. But yeah, I think about her, and I think about Jerry Allen, and I think about Alice Coltrane, and I think about these women who are so central to the music, who were innovative in the music, who are just now starting to be, you know, given their proper recognition. But there's still, I feel like I have so much to learn from them and their commitment to the music at a time, you know, when they really weren't being recognized, or, you know.
Yeah. I think especially with Mary Lou, that lineage of what she did, and I mean, just so many people to this day are still totally in awe of what she was doing and how she was doing it, and it's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah,
And
yeah,
she was prolific, and I mean,
yeah,
you know, talk about someone whose career really sort of spans a very large chunk of the history of jazz, and a very large influence on a lot of the innovator, you know, the people that are more recognized as the innovators of this music. So
yeah,
um, yeah, she's fascinating.
yeah, for sure. So if anyone wants to properly pick up Shatter the Glass Sanctuary, or if they want to catch you live, any previous
Yeah,
work, where do they go?
go to my website, naomimoonsiegel.com, and all of that's on there. You can also go to my Bandcamp page, and find my previous releases there. And yeah, all my tour listings are there. You can find me on Instagram, and you know, other social media spots. And yeah,
Okay, cool. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your time. Best of luck with the album and everything that comes your way. I appreciate it.
yeah. Thank you.
You
Nice to
bet.
meet you.
Nice to meet you.